So as we've been hearing already, every life begins and ends with a journey. And in between the cradle and the grave, there are a series of adventures, a bit like Paul and Becky's in Uganda. My longest journey to date was a 36-hour trip to Guatemala, stopping at O'Hare Airport, Chicago, en route to Central America. 2 long-haul flights, followed by a bus ride through Guatemala City, sharing a seat with chickens, grandmothers, and screaming babies. We finished up eventually in some remote village in the forests, where I was actually the first person to speak at a large student conference. I have to tell you that until then, I used to think that jet lag was for wusses. But you try speaking coherently to people after no meaningful sleep for 36 hours, transatlantic travel, and Guatemalan public transport. I could not put one foot, let alone one word, in front of another. I felt weird in a way that I have never felt so weird before. Of course, some people make religious journeys in their life, and we call them pilgrimage. And Psalm 121 is a pilgrimage song, which Jews would have sung as they made their way to the temple in Jerusalem, the holy city, for one of the 3 great festivals of their faith. That's why in your Bibles, you'll see the headline, a song of ascents. As they made their way to Jerusalem and to temple worship, they sang together in stages. But Psalm 121 isn't just a song for a journey on the way to worship. It's a song about the journey of life. And it is funny how some people travel through life. I got into the tube on the Circle line of the London Underground the other week, and there was a man next to me who was obviously working in the city. He was, dressed in the usual suit, but he was holding a stepladder. Don't ask me how on earth he got that stepladder onto the Underground and how he went up and down the escalators, but there he was in his suit with a stepladder. I was desperate to ask him what on earth he was doing with it between Paddington and King's Cross, where he eventually got out. Anyway, for all of us, life consists in these journeys that involve change and movement. As the psalmist describes them here, the comings and the goings of life. And through them all, there are, firstly, the questions of existence we all ask. I lift my eyes to the hills. Question of existence, where does my help come from? That is one of the great questions of existence we all ask. Michael Novak, the American commentator, has written a short story called Let the Questions In. And the main character in his short story is a chap called Ed. And Novak describes Ed in this way. Ed was the kind of guy who lived his whole life with the volume turned up and always on the move. I wonder if that describes you today? Are you the kind of person like Ed who lives your life with the volume turned up full blast and you like to keep going? You see, some of us do travel like that, loud and fast, in case the big questions of life begin to get through. What's the purpose of my existence? Why do people suffer? Why am I here? But you see, eventually, even though we live at 100 miles an hour with all the noise around us turned right up, eventually those questions will get through to us. Because we're all asking them. We're all trying to make sense of the journey and looking for the answers. And like the man on the tube I rode with, on the Circle line, some of us, in fact, all of us, carry stepladders to help us through. For some, the journey of life is like that Circle line on the London Underground. It just seems to go round and round and round, and people get on and stay for a while, and then they jump off. And some are clearly trying to get somewhere, and they're in a hurry, and they're wanting to make something happen. Others in life seem to be on the journey, and they're much more laid back and casual. But all of us are holding on to something as we travel. Because none of us is self-sufficient. Not completely. We each go through life needing reference points, needing support structures, needing those ladders. Some of those can be intellectual. I think the world works like this. This is what I believe. Some of those ladders are relational. This friendship, this relationship, that's my rock. Life was never intended to be a round-the-world, single-handed expedition. Now, for some of us, for some people, the focus is the family. That's where our help comes from. For others, it's the security that our job brings. That's the ladder that we climb. Yet others live by looking forward to the weekend and their leisure interests. I don't know what it is for you. You may still be looking for that prop, that support structure, but all of us are asking those questions of existence. How do I make sense of my life as I travel the journey? Where does my help come from? How can I make it through the day, the week, the month, without giving in to despair or boredom or loneliness? Who's my support? Who or what in life can I trust? Now, the man on the journey here in Psalm 21, there at verse 1, is probably looking up to the hill range around Jerusalem, that range that provided some security and protection. For generations before and after, the Jews had gazed upon this sacred place as the focal point for their national identity. Here in Zion, Jerusalem, the city of God, is all that they ever wanted and needed. Here was the place that God promised to meet with his people in blessing, the place from which God's glory would shine among the nations in healing, love, and truth. So much was wrapped up for these pilgrims within the city walls of Jerusalem. But our pilgrim, notice, sees beyond the geography and history of Jerusalem. He knows that his help is not in fact to be found in the physical space of the city or the mountains which surround them. No, his help, he says, comes from the Lord. Takes us to our second main idea tonight. The God of faith we all need. The questions of existence we all ask. The God of faith we all need. My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. The songwriter is saying that in the end, the best way to travel through life with its questions and difficulties, with its twists and turns, is with God, the one who is the maker of heaven and earth, the one who is the author of the journey of life itself. Heaven and earth. That's the first of several opposites in this psalm. Did you see them? Heaven and earth, there's one. Sun and moon, there's another. Day and night, yet another. Coming and going, another pair. Now and evermore. So there we are, traveling with these questions about existence, trying to make sense of who we are and why we're here and what it means to be a human being who loves and works, who laughs and cries, who enjoys music and sunsets, who's angry and compassionate. Who are we? And as we travel, every eventuality in my life and yours, every possibility we will ever face, every reality in time and space, says the pilgrim traveler, is covered by the God for all seasons, the maker of heaven and earth, the God who made everything, from the trillions of atoms which uniquely make up our physical existence, to the extraordinary forces of nature and the laws of the universe, the God who made everything, the God who is everywhere. The millions of light years which span the galaxies, he's there. To the nanosecond of breath which you've just taken, he's there. The God who has made everything, the God who is everywhere, and the God who knows it all. From the thought you had just a moment ago, he knows that, to the entire body of information available to us at the push of a keyboard letter on the Google search engine. God knows it all. Now, put like that, it makes sense, does it not, to travel with this God alongside you. For every other ladder that we might be holding on to won't stretch far enough or will be leaning against the wrong wall. Or like some sat-nav device in the car, it may not have all the latest coordinates, all the new landmarks and the final road layouts. The pilgrim's point is that the mountains can't help us. Not ultimately, but the one who made them can. Nothing in all creation can do the job the creator of the universe does. That's why he's the God of faith we all need. And to admit that is not to admit to a weakness, as some people argue, but to face a reality. For you and I need God like a fish needs water, like our lungs need oxygen. We were designed that way. We can't function without this God, although many of us try for most of our lives to do precisely that, practically speaking. But, says the psalmist, a God who is big enough to make this world and keep it going is big enough to help me with the issues of my life. If there is a God who made it all, who knows it all, and sees it all, then it's daft, it's silly not to trust him with it all. All the questions of my life, all the adventures I go through, all the chapters and seasons. Of course, we are assuming a truth here. The truth of God's existence. The reality of God. The Bible never seeks to prove the existence of God. Not that such evidence for God's existence doesn't exist. Neither is the psalmist saying, because life is hard and hostile, therefore we handle our fears by creating a God who can measure up to them. Now that's the way that many skeptics in our culture today think. They say that, God is a human projection to help us cope with the hostility and uncertainty of life. But the Bible starts from the other end and says that faith is a response to reality, a way of making sense of the evidence before us, the evidence of our lives. Faith is not without reasons. And so here, the pilgrim argues from the evidence for God in creation and says, the one who made the hills, the creator of the sun and moon, as I engage with who he is, he helps me on the journey. And then the psalmist looks at the rhythm and the pattern of our human lives. He didn't create his own life, says the psalmist as he reflects on himself. He doesn't sustain his own life. No, but the worshipper recognizes the extraordinary miracle of the days and seasons. That everything seems perfectly designed to make life on earth possible. It's what scientists today call the Goldilocks principle. The fine-tuning of the universe so that it's capable of sustaining human life. You see, a few miles nearer the sun and we would burn up. A few more miles further away and the earth would freeze up. But it's neither too hot or too cold. It's just right. So what is this God who made everything and makes our existence possible? What's he actually like? The language of verses 3 to 6 tells us. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. What's this God like? He's the God who never sleeps. Of course, that's a human way of describing things. And we get a sense in what follows of the conversation between the pilgrim travelers as they make their way to worship in the temple at Jerusalem. Here they are singing and talking to each other. So that verse 4 is probably a response to the prayer of the person in verse 3. May his foot not slip. May his eyes not close. And the reply comes back in verse 4. Absolutely, never, never will God slumber or sleep. This is an example of good worship. Good worship has this engaging dimension to it. It's not just this way, if you like, vertically to God. It's this way. It's horizontal. We sing and we talk back and forward to each other. We rehearse the great truths of God. We encourage each other to know God and trust God. We don't sit like stuffed shirts, our eyes towards the back of someone else's head. We face each other in community to sing and greet and encourage each other. And then, typical of Hebrew poetry, there's a moment in verses 3 to 4 where the one becomes the many, where the individual sees himself as part of the crowd. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. So there's you on the one hand, and Israel, the company of God's people, on the other. For the God of Israel is not like the gods of other nations that have to be woken up by the loud singing of the worshipper. Remember how in the Old Testament story of Elijah, the prophet taunts the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel when they can't get the barbecue alight. And so Elijah the prophet teases them about their gods' ineffectiveness. Shout louder, says Elijah. Perhaps the gods have gone on a journey. Perhaps they're snoring. But in comparison, the God of Israel is tireless in his care. He's limitless in his love. He's sleepless in his concern. And then at verse 5, the image shifts from God, the sleepless watcher, to God, the shady provider. He watches over you. He's your shade at your right hand. So not only is he the God who never sleeps, he's the God who always protects. It's an obvious picture. From daybreak to sunset, this God is with his people. As a shade at their right hand, i.e., near and present, beneath the searing heat of the day, as the long walk continues, God gives total protection. And as the night draws in and the temperature drops, and suddenly up there on the mountains, the darkness creates all kinds of insecurities, this God throws an impenetrable defense around his people. And says the psalmist, day and night he does that. All the possible perils, from sunstroke to moonstroke. Faith, you see, is this experience of God, the God who never sleeps and who always protects. For faith is fundamentally personal and individual as much as it is collective and experienced in community. That, I suppose, is the balance of Christian faith. We have a relationship with God that is deeply personal, but that is expressed together, as tonight, amongst those to whom we are accountable, from whom we learn, and whom we help. You see, people who think that they can travel the journey of life as believers on their own, with no meaningful ties to church, with no networks to support them, they're dangerously mistaken. Which is why, of course, we encourage each other to belong to small groups, to be part of a community of faith, to be engaged maybe in a one-to-one Bible study and prayer with somebody. So here's the psalmist. Each of us is assured of the care and protection of the God who never sleeps and who always protects. He is the guardian Lord. Notice that in verse 5. 5 times the psalmist calls God the Lord. Capital letters. Whenever you see the letters Lord, they're in capitals. You know that this was the Jews' way of referring to the special name of God. The signature tune, if you like, of their experience as a nation, of the God who has made himself known to them over the generations. The God, you see, who never sleeps, the God who always protects, is the God who steps into history. And Israel had its own remarkable story to tell of the time when Abraham responded to God through to the powerful experience of this God in their history as he delivered them from slavery in Egypt under Pharaoh. He was the Lord of the covenant, the one who'd entered into an agreement with them to be their faithful king, the one who would bring them into a land of their own. You see, for the worshipper in Israel, the name of God is always connected to the action of God in history. And over the years, this covenant Lord had proved himself again and again to be the one who never slept, the one who always protected his people. And as we discover in the last couplet, he is the Lord of the journey of life that we all make. Not just the God of faith that we all need, not just the one who answers the questions of existence we all ask, but he is the Lord of the journey of life that we are all making. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and evermore. For as we travel, this God is the guardian not just of the body, but of the soul. That's really the meaning of verse 7. He will watch over your life, your soul. For life is more than eating and drinking and working. For we are more than animal existence. We are more than the sum of our biochemistry. We are more than the sum of our genetic code and our past experiences. Yes, we may be dust, but we are dust that dreams, dust that hopes. We are dust that prays. We have a soul, a life. By the way, when the psalmist says there in verse 7 that we are protected and kept from all harm, he's not guaranteeing that we'll never suffer or sorrow or grieve. No, this is not a cushioned life we lead and journey we make, but a secure one. We are not immune to the difficulties and the dangers of living in a world that is hostile and unpredictable. We all know that, don't we? We all know the unpredictability and uncertainty of life. There will be the valley of the shadow of death for each and every one of us on the journey, but there will also be the presence of the Lord with us in the valley. And that's what the psalmist means when he says that ultimately no harm, no evil will harm us, because nothing will ever separate us and can ever separate us from God's love to us. Not angels or demons, not life or death, not principalities or powers. Nothing on the journey will ever separate us from the God of the journey. I'm quoting there, of course, from Romans chapter 8 in the New Testament. But it could just as well be the psalmist saying it here in Psalm 121. And according to verse 8, the Lord will watch over your coming and your going, both now, today, and forevermore. According to that verse, like a good insurance policy, the cover of God is comprehensive. My life and yours in its totality, in every aspect, my exits, my entrances, the ins and the outs, the ups and the downs, the whole tale of man, the spills of toddler's years and the thrills of teenage years and the bills of married years and the ills of retirement years and the wills of dying years. It's all covered from the cradle to the grave and beyond, says the songwriter, now, in the present moment, and in every other moment forevermore, today and tomorrow and forever. That's the promise. For that's the God we follow on the journey. So this God who is with us will be our guide, not just through life, but through life beyond death. That is the assurance of faith. That is the commitment of God to his people. The covenant Lord, faithful to his promises, rich in mercy, abounding in love. And it was this journey of faith which these pilgrims were on as they made their way every year to the temple to make animal sacrifice, recognizing as they did so God's salvation in forgiveness, rejoicing together as in community as they appreciated God's love and care and celebrating that. That was the journey of faith which these pilgrims made to the temple. And we must each make a journey. Except that we don't move towards a temple. No, we don't move towards a temple to make sacrifices for our sins. Our journey is towards a cross where sacrifice has already been made for us. Jesus, God's Son, who is the way, the truth, and the life, he made his way up that hill of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago to offer his perfect life to God in place of my very imperfect life. He, Jesus, the sinless one, died for me, the guilty one, that I might go free. At the cross, Jesus was separated from his Father so that I might never be separated from God. Now, there are still people in our culture today who have some idea of this Jesus story and his death. But it's rather like music from a distant childhood, little more than an awareness of a faint story from long, long ago. For them, for such people, the journey of life is one which has no living, daily, personal connection to the real Jesus, the Jesus of the Gospels, who spoke with such truth and who healed others with such authority and who died with such love and rose from the dead with such power. For if the journey of life isn't going to end in hopeless despair, then there has to be a point where that journey becomes a journey of real personal faith in Christ. Jesus himself said that there are two ways to travel through life. There's the broad way, the 6-lane highway, and loads of people are making that journey through life. And then there is the narrow way, the single-lane track. The broad way, he says, where everyone appears to be traveling, the broad way ends in destruction. But that little single track, the narrow way, ends in life. But the entry onto the narrow way is by the narrow door of faith in him. That's the conscious starting point on the journey with God. The acknowledgement, as with the psalmist here, that God is our helper. That we can't answer the question of existence without the God who made us. That he is with us on the journey, involved in the ordinariness of life. So ordinary sometimes that if we're not careful, we may miss God on the way. Faith knows him to be the one who is there, the guardian of our comings and goings, the God of the covenant who reveals himself in history, supremely and personally and uniquely in Jesus Christ. For God, who is the creator of everything that is, and the author of every human story from its beginning to its end, God himself wrote himself into the human story in the person of Jesus. There's a very powerful story told by Jorge Borges in the Library of Babel. In the story, Borges sees the universe as a gigantic library. And at first, you are thrilled as you grasp the keys which allow you entry to that library. And you move along gallery after gallery, row on row of books. And there is no problem in the world which does not have a solution somewhere on those shelves. But before long, you give up in despair. There is far too much to know, too many choices to be made. Life is not long enough. You feel you know more and more about less and less. You came into the library of life looking for truth, and you end up confused and disappointed. And like the librarian in Borges' story, hoping against hope that there must be somewhere on the shelf one book that makes sense of all the others. And better still, somewhere in the library, a man analogous to God, as the author puts it, someone who can explain it all. But the man in Borges' story dies in despair because he never finds that book or meets the person who could make sense of it all. You see, that's what happens if we shut God out of our lives. For there is a book which makes sense of the whole library of life, and it is the world's bestseller. And there is a man analogous to God who can explain it all, and we date our era by him. And he is not hiding from us in the recesses of the library. No, he has come to meet us. Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. And if we want to journey in life with that kind of confidence and security, then Jesus is the one to whom we are to come. With our questions, with our struggles, committing to him all the chapters of our lives, all the seasons that roll by, knowing that he will be with us in every situation we meet. Through every uncertainty we have to travel, he'll be with us, and by his Spirit he will guide us, and he will bring us home. For the life of Jesus is that everlasting life, and he offers us that as we place our confidence and our faith in him. He is the great God who steps into time in order that we might enjoy his presence with us through time and beyond time, to that world that he will bring about, that world of righteousness and truth and justice.